I don't have very much patience for culture in general, unless it. Now, I have to go back and say, well, there are some parts of culture that work for me. These are the things that I like. And then there are other parts of culture that just don't work for me. I have no patience for. And these are the things that I don't like. They don't fit with my values. They don't fit with my preferences. And honestly, the larger of those two groups, what doesn't fit with my presence, not my presence, my preferences. Well, one of the things about our culture that I see a lot of today is the a sense that people are just so mean and they slander others. And that's true. People can be very mean. Yes, there is such a thing as slander, and it happens. And I think one of the places it happens in lots of contexts, but two of the contexts that I most often see it is just me. One is on Capitol Hill. The second is on social media. But I don't, there's a lot of people who use the idea that people slander others. And they don't understand what slander means. Slander is a untruthful statement made derogatorily toward or about another person, which would diminish or destroy their reputation and their integrity. And it happens. It's all. It does. I would never want to dispute that we live in a slanderous culture. But every mean thing is not necessarily slanderous. There's a lot of things in the Bible. If you take the entirety of the Bible, all 66 books, Old and New Testament, there's a lot of mean things in there. Read the prophets of the Old Testament. Kind of pretty terse statements that, and well, okay, get off my high horse. Why am I talking about all this? Well, it's because in Psalm 15, David asks a couple of questions, which my summary of his two questions is who can have intimacy with God? And then he answers the question, the one whose walk is blameless, who does what is righteous, who speaks the truth from their heart, whose tongue utters no slander. Jesus said what comes out of, and this is a pretty gross paraphrase of it, but essentially what he said was, whatever comes out of my mouth it comes out of my mouth because it was in my heart. And whatever is in my heart is eventually going to come out of my mouth. And I know this to be true just observing my own life. And if that was not enough, marriage counseling will convince you of this fully. There are times in marriage counseling when I know, I say I know, I have pretty much all the evidence I need that one or both of the spouses are just, what's in their heart is just dark. They've been deeply wounded. Now they are resentful. And often by the time I see them, they have moved on to bitterness. And very often they have moved on to a stage where they hope for, they wish, they desire harm for the other. What comes out of my mouth it does that because that's what's in my heart. And people who slander others, they do that not merely intellectually, they do that from their heart. Whose tongue utters no slander. for the sake of honesty and transparency, I have to tell you that there are a lot of times where under my breath, my tongue utters slander. I'm trying to recognize that more often and run it through the filter of, is it true? And some of, I don't ever want to get to the point that much of, but some of what, I utter under my breath is not true, and it is slanderous. I have to be careful. I've learned I was in located ministry for only 45 years, but I learned over that period of time, man, you have to guard what comes out of your mouth, what is uttered from your lips. And there's got to be a filter. You just can't say everything you think. Well, the kind of person who has intimacy with God has learned or is learning how to withhold everything they think, and especially when it comes to saying things about other people that are derogatory and negative. When the truth needs to be spoken, that just precedes this. They speak the truth from their hearts. The truth is not always soft. I would say, in fact, most often, truth has got a pretty sharp edge. It is often very hard. But we speak it not out of punishment. We speak it from our heart. Here's the thing. Truth, living within, living by, speaking the general environment of our existence is truth. And when that's the case, we won't utter slander. You see, we live in a world of truth, and slander, whatever else slander is, the slander is never true. All right. And he goes on, who does no wrong to a neighbor. Now, this is that's like, didn't I learn that in kindergarten? Oh, wait a minute. I never went to kindergarten because I was 5 when we lived in a little town of Vicey, Oklahoma, which didn't even have a kindergarten. They probably do now, but back in the 50s they didn't. Well, okay. So I did learn that as a little boy. I mean, didn't you, as a little person, learn be nice to people? I mean, that should be like, if every home should have a set of rules, and one of the first ones would be kind, be nice to people. Well, David says, this person who can have intimate fellowship with God, they do no wrong to a neighbor. They don't. Does that need unpacking? Only in this sense. I want you to think back to an encounter that Jesus had with a teacher of the law back in his biography. The teacher, Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. The first question was, got to go back to this. What is the greatest command? And Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. And then the Jewish teacher asked, who's my neighbor? Good question. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say I don't think he was just trying to worm his way out of this idea of love your neighbor as yourself. Maybe he was legitimately, okay, what does that mean? Who is my neighbor? And Jesus tells a story. I bet you remember the story if you had any experience in church. It's the story of a guy, a Jewish guy, that was taking a difficult and dangerous journey and was mugged and beaten up on the highway and left. It was robbed, left for dead. But he hadn't died. A Samaritan guy comes by. Now, don't miss the significance of that, because most Jews would have told this just the opposite if they wanted to paint a beneficent picture. They would have said that it was a Samaritan who was beaten up and left for dead, and a Jewish guy came by and helped him. No. This was a Jewish guy that was beaten up. Oh, and by the way, a priest and a Levite walked that direction, saw him, and whatever they were thinking, Jesus doesn't say. He just said they passed him up. Why is it the significance of a Samaritan stopping to care for the immediate emergency needs of this guy? Wine and oil. Those were the two primary tools of the day for, emergency. That would have been the emergency kit. And the significance of it was that Jews despised Samaritans. And, the feeling was mutual. So it's like there's an emotional weight to Jesus' answer that we probably wouldn't. I don't know how we'll be able to relate to it very well. It was racial. It was religious. It was cultural. We kind of live in a world where there's all kinds of tension in all of those areas. So take your pick of who that would represent in our day. But the Samaritan stops, cares for the guy, takes him to an inn, nursing him back to the front door of health, and he has to go on for his business and tells the innkeeper, you take care of him, and when I come back, I'll pay you for whatever the needs were. And that, in Jesus' economy, is the description of the neighbor. Who was the neighbor in that story? Well, for the Jewish guy, he had two Jewish neighbors come by, see him, and move right along. Nothing to see here. And then a Samaritan that came by and saw him and decided there is something here and I can help. And so what we draw from the parable of the Good Samaritan is my neighbor is whomever in my sphere of encounter and influence, whoever is there is my neighbor. Oh my gosh. That's too huge. So you mean that, I bump into somebody at the grocery store, they're my neighbor? Yeah. Somebody, that stupid person on the freeway that I just want to shake my fist at, I want to roll down my window and scream at them, they're my neighbor? Yeah. And you could press it on a little further if you wanted to and say, anyone in my sphere to whom I could be useful or helpful is my neighbor. Well, I don't know that that's exactly what David meant when he said, who does no wrong to a neighbor. I think he may actually mean people in my neighborhood. Don't forget, Jewish culture was about neighborhoods and about the small group. This was, even in a big city of Jerusalem, it's almost like it was a collection of villages. He doesn't do anything wrong to his neighbor. I don't leave my trash on his lawn. I don't back into his car and not tell him. That's not hard. You don't do wrong things to your neighbor. Gosh, it's not rocket science, and I've made it more difficult than it probably actually is. But I've successfully used up all my time, so we're going to have to shut her down, and I'll start again next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.